As retail reopens, there's been a lot more conversation around the role stores will play in an increasingly digital world. Many see physical stores as dinosaurs, whose role will increasingly be a combination of distribution centers supporting e-commerce and a product showroom of sorts. But others argue that shopping is a social activity that is a fundamental part of most consumers' lives, and that Gen Z and younger millennials in particular seek experiences, creating a huge opportunity for physical stores. So what are the big opportunities for stores that we might be overlooking? I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for joining me here today. It's wonderful to have you as part of our international community that now spans over 100 countries. It's great to know that there are so many people around the world who are listening to this show and benefiting from the experience, insights, and wisdom of the many truly outstanding people who are guests on A Seat at the Table. Today I'm speaking with Ian Scott, a leading retail consultant with over 20 years' experience working with top brands including Lego, Coca-Cola, Estee Lauder, Dyson, P&G, and many others. Ian helps brands achieve greater market success through design and implementation of retail stores and displays, store research and behavioral psychology, and global innovation and trends. In this podcast, Ian talks about the disconnect between what retailers think consumers want in a retail experience and what consumers actually want. How to create an engaging retail experience even if you're not selling celebrity products, and whether more investment in new technology is the way forward for retail. Before we get started, if you're a supply chain executive who'd like to finally put an end to information overload and get a simple, concise, fact-based summary of key market developments and shifts, then the current situation in sourcing is exactly what you're looking for. To learn more, head on over to thecurrentsituation.net. That's thecurrentsituation.net, where you can get all of the details. Now let's sit down with Ian and learn how we can leverage stores to gain a competitive advantage, especially in a challenging market. Ian, I'm really so happy that you've taken the time to join us here on A Seat at the Table. I think that retail is such a big topic, and it was kicked to the curb even before the pandemic, with everybody saying it was an e-commerce or bust kind of an environment, that physical retail was dead, we're never going back. Particularly the younger generation, they don't want to shop in stores. And it's interesting because now that it looks like we're drawing a line under the pandemic, we've really seen a resurgence in a return to physical retail, at least if you look at the initial, and I know it's the early stages, right, of same-store sales and so on for physical retail. It does look like foot traffic is up. So from your point of view, as someone who is an expert on retail, what are the big opportunities right now that you think physical retailers should be looking at grabbing?
Well, I mean, certainly coming back to the first comment you said first, I became a staunch advocate of the physical retail store is not dead. Pre-pandemic across all categories globally, physical stores were responsible for 83% of sales. And I think mid-pandemic last year, it would drop to 75%. So even during lockdowns and all sorts of restrictions, stores were still 3/4 of all sales.
That's interesting.
That's far from dead.
Right.
The balance is still going as well. What we found funny, e-commerce is growing. It's not found its natural saturation point. It's still increasing.
Right.
And then during pandemic, we had a huge upsurge, understandably, because all the stores were closed.
Yes.
So we have that artificial temporary change driven by fear and government legislation. And what we're finding now is that shift back. So as you're saying, footfall is increasing. I read one report saying it was around 90% of pre-COVID levels, but I think it varies by region. And people are going, oh, the growth of e-commerce is dropping. And I'm going, no, it's not. All it's doing is settling back to where it was on its original growth curve.
Yeah, exactly.
You see e-commerce growth curves sort of starting from, say, 2015, and you can see this rise. And then there's a blip, and it's now dropping back to where it would have been on that rise. So I think we need to take a step back. But coming back to your question, I think one of the most noticeable things that sort of came through was we had a greater appreciation of how a physical store works, much like a cinema, a restaurant, a holiday, where we were deprived human interaction. So the physical store, its two unique qualities are human interaction face-to-face and the ability to touch and try products. So I think what we're going to find now is physical stores are they need to work harder. And also there is a growing trend now where you may start the shopping journey in the store, but not end it. So you may go into a store, particularly in fashion, where you can go in to try on products. but you may not buy then. You may buy sat on your sofa with your phone in your hand later that day or even a week later.
Right.
So the store has to appreciate that it's not just the end of the journey. It needs to work with the digital channels to start a journey and give people a reason to then complete it on their own terms digitally. So I think we're seeing stores will still showcase product because, as I say, 3/4 of sales still complete there. But I think there's a lot to be done to work with it. And I call it symbiotic retail. It's not so much omni-channel. Omni-channel is the choice of channel. The symbiosis is where they work together for the common good. So I think clever retailers are understanding this, and they're giving people a chance to utilize the uniqueness of the physical space as part of that journey. And you see brands like Nike are brilliant at doing that, and the way that they make their app work in the store and assist and make it easy for you to buy as you want to.
I think that's an interesting point. I think both of those points are interesting. First of all, you're right. E-commerce is certainly not tanking. It's more or less, if you were to look at it probably 5 years from now, when you have a longer, part of the graph going forward, like you said, you will see that it just simply spiked because of market conditions. So it's still on its upward trajectory, but it had a spike during the time when everything else was closed. So e-commerce is definitely playing a very, very key role. But at the same time, what you said about physical retail is certainly important. I mean, particularly, for a lot of products. I mean, actually, surprisingly to me, even products where you don't have a lot of touch and feel necessary to make the decision. Take, for example, an Apple computer or an iPhone. I mean, essentially, there's not a lot of color options, right? There's not a lot of style options. And since half the people around you probably have it, or maybe more, you know what it looks like. And yet people like to go into the store. Apple has those stores for a reason. So I think that there is, like you're saying, there's a lot a store can do. But I like your choice of words, that it's a symbiotic relationship. It's almost seamlessly integrated, that allows people just multiple ways to complete that purchase when and how they see fit. I think that's really important.
It's also then important to make sure that your message, your availability, your price point, and your product range are consistent across all channels.
Right.
Online specials, managers specials, and things like that can be a problem, because there's nothing more annoying than going on a website to look at a product, and go into the store and buy it, and finding it's 10% more expensive. You have to unify this, and there's still a huge issue of departments being siloed within businesses. Where you're going, oh yes, our digital team are now working with our retail team, and I'm like, why haven't they been doing that for the last 5 years? You have to offer seamless consistency across the channels.
I mean, I can understand why in a physical store you might be offering a special that's not online being reaching a very broad audience, physical being very localized, and you may need to compete against other local players. But what I never understood is why initially, brands were offering better prices if you went online and bought the product than if you bought it in store. Yes. And that was very much the case, I would say, in most cases pre-pandemic, for sure.
You have situations where you go in the store and they go, no, it's not in stock. In fact, go online because it's cheaper. And you're in the store and they're directing you out of the store to the website, and it's just like you're creating another barrier and friction to purchase. Going, I'm here, the products are on the shelves, but you're telling me it's better to go home and get my laptop out to make a purchase, even though I'm in your store now. It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it made no sense, because when you're in the store, you have a lot less competition. Whereas when you're online, a million other things pop up that's very easy for that person to be persuaded to go elsewhere. Yeah. So exactly. I think that's an important point, that how to look at that integration between your physical and your and your digital components of your business.
Part of that uniqueness that the store has is you can go in on a mission to buy one thing, and you can get easily distracted or have additional interest in other products. And I think that's really important in the store. But also how you utilize staff. You see that an amazing staff member will give you a memory that will embed in your subconscious. Likewise, a bad one will. So staff have the opportunity to add value or decrease value depending on how successful that interaction is. So I think we're seeing now more and more stores are developing staff and recognizing the value. Now, in grocery, that it's sort of going the other way, because staff are this annoying overhead as that everyone's desperately trying to match all the value retailers. And so they're being devalued. But I think it's certainly in places like fashion, beauty as well. Staff can make a massive positive difference. And I think it's really important to recognize that and invest in them, because there's a hidden cost of unhappy staff leaving and the cost of recruiting them that doesn't immediately appear on the balance sheet. But happy staff add huge value. And I think that's, again, one of the differentiators of a physical store.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'm very glad you brought that up, because you're right. Most people who run a business look at staff as a very unpleasant expense. It's a big expense in terms of money. It's harder to manage, so it's expensive and difficult to manage. And at the same time, like you said, the customer loyalty aspect of having good people is off the charts, even if it's just a very small interaction. And I think particularly nowadays, where people do feel lonelier, more isolated, not just because of the pandemic, which obviously isolated a lot more people, but even before the pandemic, more people live alone. As we move into an age where people are also starting to work remotely, at least for now, with that hybrid work situation that many companies are implementing, sometimes the only human contact people get, right, is if they go to 7-Eleven to buy a bottle of water, or they go to the post office to mail a letter. And surprisingly, just that smile and how are you today, just that small snippet of conversation can be huge for people. Absolutely huge.
I agree. And I think we come to appreciate those points of contact more as well. You know, when you see how Apple, we referenced Apple before, you know, their stores are superb.
Yes.
But they're very simple. There's a very clean aesthetic. It's all about the product. But the staff, you notice that difference, particularly when you look at that sort of electronics category. There's often a sense of, you know, these people are either bored and talking amongst themselves, or they're pushing hard because they're going to make a commission. Whereas, you know, in Apple, they're not commission salespeople. They've been trained really well. And I had a talk just the other day with an amazing lady called Megan Thompson, who used to work at the Apple sort of global team in developing staff, and understanding that thinking behind how they prepare their staff to engage with customers was a real eye-opener. And then Lush, the beauty retailer, they have some incredible staff, and I've often championed them. You go into most Lush stores, and they can be very eclectic, group of people visually, but they are so friendly. They're so engaged. They want to talk. And I took a load of people from one of my clients around stores in London. We went into Lush, and this chap, Jack, who's an assistant manager, gave us the talk. And he had a big bushy beard and long hair, and he was wearing shorts, and he was running around waving his arms and getting so enthusiastic. And everyone was captivated by his enthusiasm for the company and showcasing the products. And all the people from this company going, I want to steal him and put him in my store, you know? And you've got that real sense of the value that they add as well, definitely.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, I find that good customer service, whether it be in a store or in any situation, right, is absolutely game-changing in terms of my perception of the brand and loyalty. And a lot of people will argue that, well, you know, you're part of the boomer generation and the younger generation simply wants to do everything online with no contact. I would debate that, but maybe that's just my opinion.
I think one of the comments that often comes through is that the younger generations are seeking experiences.
Right, exactly.
I think Gen Z are the least engaged with Amazon, for example. And Amazon offers convenience and availability and speed. Okay, so you get that wonderful benefit from Amazon.
Yes.
What you don't get with Amazon is engagement. And I think you also see it in their stores. The Amazon Fresh and the Amazon Go stores, I think, are the most successful examples that Amazon has. But they're a convenience store. It's about a simple transaction.
Right.
And all Amazon stores are data-driven science labs.
Yes.
first and foremost. They've closed all the bookstores. They closed the 4-star stores. Now, they really amused me because, if you go into an Amazon Fresh, it's because you want to buy your lunch or an evening meal.
Right.
Okay. It's a clear mission. What's the mission in the Amazon 4-star store? It's stuff other people like.
Yeah.
Because it's everything that's got a 4-star recommendation from other people. So what's your mission? Is it a clothing store? Is it a food store? So they're a little bit odd. And so what you find is Amazon is very transactional, and they are the best in the world at it. But if you want an experience, you don't get an experience. So what you're finding is these younger generations are seeking experiences. So this is an opportunity to catch the next generation coming through and engage them in physical spaces.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I heard somewhere, I can't really at the moment put my finger on where, but someone had pointed out that the typical narrative around the failure of some of the Amazon stores, right, the bookstore, the 4-star store, etc., was the typical narrative was that, oh, you see, that's proof of concept that nobody wants to shop in physical stores anymore. And there was another commentary, which I thought was really interesting, that said, actually, no, it points out that being a successful retailer is a unique skill. And while Amazon is a genius when it comes to e-commerce, they don't know how to do physical retail. That's just not their thing. Yeah. And so it's not a proof that against physical retail. It simply identifies that you need to master your own category.
Exactly. I was just reading about the Amazon style fashion store that's opened in Glendale in California.
Right.
And again, you look at it and it's showcasing, you scan the app and it's available in the changing room and you're scheduled and it will notify you. And again, I thought it's typical Amazon about wowing you with technology, which is frictionless, and you can wave your hand with a palm payment for Amazon One and things like that. Then I looked at the design of the store and I was like, oh, that looks really boring. And I think that's where it misses. And I know Amazon has some amazing retail people. I'm friends with one of them. And, I know the skill set's there, but they're process and data driven. And unfortunately, especially in fashion, every once in a while, you just want to wow. Right. And this is where Burberry are brilliant. I mean, Burberry have embraced the digital and e-commerce size, but they make the stores really interesting. Their store in Regent Street in London is stunning.
Wow.
It's absolutely stunning visual feast. And I think that's particularly within fashion because you get to touch and feel and the feel of the product is very subjective.
Right.
And it's really hard to replicate on store. And then you have these real issues then with the returns. Certainly in fashion, there's that wonderful phrase wardrobing where people will order 4 knowing they only want 1, but it gives them the choice and they'll send the other 3 back.
Yes.
So returns. And it's really interesting to see how Zara have now taken this stance. They're the first major fashion retailer to go, we're going to charge for online returns. So that's going to be really interesting to see how everyone else responds to that.
Very much so, because, in the case of, certainly in fashion, where you not only have how the product looks, but fit, which is always challenging under any circumstance. Once you throw that in, well, that'll be very interesting to see. So, getting back to your original point about charging for returns, I think will be an interesting equation. There was always that sense, well, if I'm not sure I can bring it back, okay, I'll buy it. And then mostly they didn't. But if they did, like you said, you got the person back in the store. There might be new merchandise in or things they hadn't seen. So typically they returned one, they walked out with something else, probably even a bigger ticket than what they returned. So there was ways, right, that retail could leverage that. So I think it's interesting to see, as you're pointing out, how e-commerce is trying to solve one problem and perhaps create an opportunity for themselves.
Exactly. And I think there's an opportunity. If you explain this in the right way with empathy and creativity,
right,
I think you can develop a tone of voice and narrative that customers will understand. Because, if you say, this is an issue that's costing our industry a lot of money, but also it's helping us reduce waste. So if you educate customers, then they end up embracing this situation rather than reacting negatively as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when you look at retailers, oftentimes there seems to be a disconnect between what retailers think consumers want and what, when we talk to consumers, they say they actually want it. And I mean in terms of a retail experience. How do you see that? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's really interesting because what you find is so many people rely on focus groups and the wonderful NPS score. And both of them, personally, I think NPS is utterly useless. You know, how likely are you to recommend this to someone else has nothing to do with shopper behavior.
Yes,
and likewise, focus groups are great for opinion.
Right.
But they have nothing to do, you don't get viable insights on how people want to shop with you because as humans, we are fickle, we're inconsistent, we're spontaneous. So you put the same shopper into the same store 1 hour apart, they will shop completely differently. And the variable is their mind. It's you will see different things. You will be in a different mood. You will have a different mindset, a different state of mind. And we're impulsive. So this is where physical store is better than online. It's coming back to that peripheral vision that I'm talking about. You'll suddenly notice, ooh, something shiny over there. I better go and have a look, which is harder to replicate online. And I think the only real way to understand shoppers is to observe them when they don't know they're being observed, which is where you have a lot of this sort of in-store camera technology coming through, and the ability, you can tap into the security camera that's already there, and you can follow one person around a store. And you can do this still protecting their identity. You can track mobile phone signals, which are great because mobile phone signals are unique. So you can know when that person is a returning customer or whether they're a first-time customer. And to observe how they use the space, what do they see? Are they responding to that window? And is it driving footfall? Which parts of the store are they going to? You get to understand whether your windows need to work harder. Oh, no one's going to the back of the store. Therefore, do we need to do something to either rearrange categories? Do we put our most popular category at the back of the store to drive, which is what happens in supermarkets? Beer and bread and things like that are normally at the back of the store because they're destination categories. You could do that within fashion. Or it's like, do we need to redesign the store? Do we need to improve our signage? And then you can test and learn. And so there's a lot of things here that need to be understood because the shop was with a director from Lego a few years ago, and we were at their flagship store in London. And I said, you created this wonderful store, and now you open the doors and you stupidly let humans in and they ruin everything. And he burst out laughing because it is the humans, this weird, unpredictable thing. And by understanding basic sort of human behavior, it helps. To me, there are 3 levels. There's human behavior. You will have regional and cultural variances, and then you will have specific behavior based on the category. We buy a car or a sofa in a different way to how we buy a pint of milk, for example.
Yes.
So understanding those 3 variants, but underneath it all is human DNA, how humans think and make decisions, and understanding that fickle nature is really important. When you look at a window, I think 3% of shoppers even notice a window when they walk down the street. Wow. So you're working off 97% failure or ignorance or non-engagement, which means if you can just add 1% more shoppers noticing your window, that's a 33% increase. So you're working huge. Off huge ignoring of this wonderful thing you've created and spent millions of dollars on. The vast majority of people are going to ignore it. So it's quite humbling when you do this. I used to work for a behavioural company, and they had this wonderful process where they would get senior directors and they'd send them, say, to Nike Town and go, tell us the price of that football boot. And they come back and they go, it's £120. Okay. What was the boot next to it? I don't know. What was the huge 3-meter high sign as you went up the escalators to get there? Oh, I didn't see that. And it was a way of making them aware of all these things they put in their store, how peripheral they are to shoppers' awareness. And it's like, what can you do to just trigger? And like I say, 1% more noticing that is actually a huge uplift because the vast majority don't see. So that understanding is really, really, and it's quite humbling and depressing when you realize how few of your customers actually notice all the wonderful things you put in your store.
It's very true. And I think that gets back to your point about the importance of having good people on the selling floor, because as they're talking to a customer, they can point out things that, like you said, it's true. I find that with myself, a lot of things that I had overlooked in a store that somebody then in the course of a conversation says, well, actually, had you taken a look at this? Or, I don't know if you're interested in it, but we've just gotten this in. And you do take a look if you have if you have a few minutes, and it definitely can turn into a sale.
Yeah. Definitely can make a big difference. And then the staff can then connect with the great store design. And it's what I call a 1 + 1 = 3, where the cumulative benefits of the two working together are greater than the sum of their parts.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, getting back to what you were saying about creating that sort of magical retail experience in a store. Now, certainly it is a lot easier if you happen to be selling Nike or Apple, if those are your brands. How can retailers who are selling less glamorous products do this? What can you do if you're selling a basic product or something that is a little bit more, generic, so to speak?
I get asked this quite a lot because about 15 months ago, I ended up writing a massive review of Nike's retail strategy. It was going to be a small LinkedIn post, and I started researching. And 3 weeks later, it was a 78-page report. And I was I was talking about how they understand their customer, how they develop store formats, how they use social media and advertising. And people say, well, that's okay for Nike because they're a $40 billion business. But I go, no, but the principle is scalable because it all stems from, first of all, understanding the customer. Now, what they can throw big budgets at the solutions they apply, but they understand their customer. When they made that very bold statement about, Colin Kaepernick taking the knee at the national anthem, they supported that. And what happened was their stock price dropped and then rose back to a higher level than it was before. And I don't think it was a cynical marketing ploy, but they were just confident that by taking a stance, that their customers would understand the stance, even if they didn't necessarily believe in it. And that comes down to understanding their customers.
Yes.
And when you look at how they develop their app, so it enhances the in-store experience. Now, that's great because they can throw $1 million at developing the app, but their principle is based on understanding their customers. And I think if you're a mum and pop store with a Facebook account, you apply that same principle. The challenge is getting to understand your customers. And you can make posts on your Facebook page when you understand your customer and have the same principle and effect that Nike do by opening a House of Innovation store on Fifth Avenue in New York. And so it really stems back to that, which means that, it's a different thing for each one. But if you get to engage with your customers and understand them, you tailor your responses and you engage them on that level as well. Very easy to say in a podcast as a glib off the cuff comment, but how each person does that, there's no sort of generic formula. But the more you engage with your customers, the more you get to understand them and the more you can then start delivering things that work for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that, it's easy to manage the business off a spreadsheet. It's a lot harder to, in a sense, be like the old-time merchants when the people at the very senior level were on the selling floor, in part because you didn't have all the technical things that we have now that enable you to do things more remotely. So they really knew that customer and they understood what they wanted, almost to the point where the senior person was hearing from a customer, gee, I'd love to buy this, or can't you, stock this or that. And so they really did have that feel, plus having a certain skill for being a good merchant. So I think it's interesting that you bring that up, that really the secret sauce, so to speak, is getting close to that customer and understanding what that experience is that they want.
It is, and social media actually makes that possible. Like I said, coming back to the mom and pop store with a Facebook page, people will interact on the Facebook page. If they're really angry, I mean, you tend to get the extremes. You get the really happy and the really unhappy customers that engage, and there's a mass majority in the middle that are normally silent consumers, like you get in any social media. But if you're doing something well, people will start commenting and they'll share and they'll become your advocates. That's true. And that's where social media selling can be brilliant when you get it right, but oh goodness me, it has a sting in the tail if you get it wrong. For sure. Businesses have been finished because of social media reactions. So you have to get it right. But it's that opportunity, like you say, the old days, senior staff would be on the shop floor talking to customers, and you get that feedback. Social media allows us to some extent to get that same engagement and feedback. So if you're an online business, your social media is your touch point. Coming back to Nike, I was learning that they have a social media team, and certain keywords on social media will activate this team. And then you get Fred from Nike talking to you one-on-one. They have a Nike hat on, but you're talking to Fred. And, and there are so many brands that do it really well. But I remember seeing posts from Nike where a lady going, oh, my goodness, my run's going to be difficult this morning because I drank a bottle of wine last night. And the response from Nike was, wine's still carbs. Let us know how the run goes. And you get that one-on-one sort of fun interaction,
right?
Where you're meeting that person at their level. You're not some corporate giant.
Right.
It's Fred chatting to you, even though it's coming through the Nike social media portal. And that's a great way of then developing that one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And you're right. When you start to look at it from that point of view, it can be scaled up or down depending upon the circumstances of the particular retailer. It's simply a matter of looking at it through that lens.
Yes, it is. I mean, you need to invest time in social media. And I think a lot of people view it as something to do if they've got time.
Yes,
and I turn around and say, no, you have to be interactive, responsive. You need to be consistent and regular. And then it becomes a point of contact for your customers. And so that's difficult because a lot of people don't view it as a necessity. They view it as a nice to have if they have time. And that's where it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, and also not taking advantage of talking to the people who come into your stores, who, if they came into the store, they must have an interest to some extent in what you sell.
I mean, walking through that door is a commitment as a shopper. It's a commitment,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have to reward that.
So there is information if you chose to speak to the people and make a note. It's hard to do because you're busy doing other things and you're not really thinking about it. But you're right. It's like anything else. If you prioritize, it is more likely to get done.
Yes, definitely.
Now, one other question that comes to mind, I guess circling back to what we were talking about a bit earlier, and that is there's been a plethora of new technology that's come out for retail, and it's great because it's providing a lot of opportunities, particularly in data capture, but also in facilitating various things. How do you sort of look at that technology from the point of view of adding benefit or perhaps becoming a bright, shiny object that distracts from what's the real heart of what retailers need to look at? I don't know if I'm phrasing that well, but
no,
I mean.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean because we see a lot of technology come into stores. And I think this comes back to that very similar sort of situation as the previous sort of topic we just discussed is if you understand your customers, if you understand how they find you, how they engage, how they explore and how they buy, then you use that as your sense check. Again, it's like, how do you design the store and how do you develop staff? But it's how do you use technology? So if you look at a piece of technology and go, does this help our customers find us? Does it help them engage? Does it help them buy? Does it help them come back again? Then explore it. If it doesn't, then don't do it. The problem is too many people 10 years ago, 15 years ago, used to get loads of retailers going, I want to put screens in my store. And you're like, why? And I spoke to a client who's going to spend £500,000 putting screens with no consideration of the content they were going to put on it. Oh, we'll run the TV advert, and you go, oh, goodness me. Right, the TV advert is about awareness to make you go in the store in the first place. In the store is how do you assist the purchase? They're already in the store. Right. TV ad's done its job, and it's what I call the tail wagging the dog. Right. If you're going, I want technology, what can I put on it? You've got to remember that a fancy screen is just a poster frame. It's just that the poster you put in is moving. And therefore it's a channel to deliver a message. The message is more important than the technology. So if you're thinking about the technology, it's just a delivery mechanism. And if that doesn't assist, don't do it. So it comes back to, again, if you understand how your customer wants to engage with you, that's your checklist. Does this assist, speed up, improve that process? If it doesn't, save the millions of dollars and put another poster up, and I think this is one of the problems. And there are some wonderful examples of relevant technology assisting processes. Some of the smart mirror technology that's in the Amazon store, but is also in, for example, in the latest Adidas stores, assist the process because if you're in the changing room and you've got the wrong size, and I love this analogy of instead of that half-dressed run of shame across the shop floor to get the other size and run back, You press a button and a member of staff will do it for you.
Right.
Now, to me, that's technology that assists the customer. If it's assisting the business at the expense of the customer, then it's an utter waste of time and you will lose out. So, and the best thing is when it's win-win. If it's better for the business and better for the customer, then use it. So just sit back and go, how will this help our customers? Too much technology is to make it easier for the shop. Download our app. Why should I download your app and add it to the 75 apps already on my phone? Give me a reason to make it beneficial for me. I know why you as a retailer want me to have the app, but why is it beneficial to me? So I think you just need to step back and think about the benefits to the customer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, you've shared so many interesting things, Ian. How can people get in touch with you? I think a lot of people would want to connect with you and be able to learn more. Where do we find you?
Thank you. I tend to live solely on LinkedIn. I don't even have Twitter, I'm ashamed to say. But yeah, if you go onto LinkedIn and look for Ian Scott or Ian Scott Retail Consulting, you'll find me. I do a lot of store visits online, so I'll be regularly posting reviews of stores, sharing stories and articles that I've discovered as well.
Well, that's perfect. I'm going to include those links in the show notes and over on our website, seedpodcast.com, so that people can find them. And I really want to thank you for sharing so many great insights. This is, the timing is just perfect considering that retail is really ready to roll.
Thank you. And I'm sort of humbled and flattered that you felt I could add any value to your podcast. So thanks for inviting me.
Well, you have, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to A Seat at the Table. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something from it, I'd love to hear about it. Your feedback powers this show. If you'd like to support the show, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Also, share episodes you found valuable on LinkedIn or other social media and call out your biggest insight or takeaway from the program. And don't forget to tag me, Jane Singer. I love seeing which episodes you liked best. And if you have time, please leave a review on any of the major podcast channels. Also, don't forget to check out our website, seatpodcast.com. That's SEAT podcast.com. You'll find all kinds of bonus content there, including free ebooks, discounts on apps and other products, as well as a preview of upcoming podcast episodes. You can also send a message with any thoughts, feedback, or suggestions there, and yes, I will read them. Thank you for joining me today and supporting the show. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in our next episode of A Seat at the Table.